Welcome to the No Plan B podcast. I'm Jean Falacara, and we're here to discuss business, science, and mindset. My guests here are not to sell anything. They are here to open their book of life. We want to understand what their purpose, goal, value, and priority are. I want to look at their action, their behavior over time, and consider what kind of background and experiences they're coming from to be the man and woman they are today. No BS, no cat. This is the No Plan B podcast. Welcome.
Thanks, Amy, for joining us. As always, I don't like to introduce people because we don't do a great job by introducing people. We just read bios and things like that. So I'd like you to introduce yourself. It's even easier for me, but it's always most accurate. And I think it's better for the public to understand who you are. And this is what we're going to actually really dig into today.
Okay, perfect. Well, I'm Amy Killen. I'm a medical doctor. I live in Salt Lake City, Utah. And I was a former emergency room doctor. I did ER medicine for 10 years and then I got out about 10 years ago. In the last 10 years, I've been focusing on longevity and optimization and regenerative medicine using stem cells. I do a lot of work with sexual health and skin health, but really kind of all the things that, we care about to keep us healthy long term. And I have a practice here, and I also have a supplement company, and I do a couple of different projects as well.
Very happy to be involved in one of them recently. This is Unveiling. We're going to talk about that. It's interesting because I've tried to search a bit and to find some information, even using AI assistant didn't work, so they're not ready yet, to find some information about you when you were a kid. And nothing is out there, nothing is public, nothing is divulgated. So it's very interesting for me to know more because, the story here is you've been doing so many things. Of course, you're one of these leader in longevity. You are more than well known and recognized, but we want to know now, as a kid, teenager, and then growing up, why?
How did I end up here? Wow, that's a deep question.
It is. Like to be deep.
We'll start strong. I've always loved science. So I've always loved science and biology. Those have been something that just my entire youth and certainly through college, I was interested in. I actually didn't think I wanted to be a doctor. I wasn't sure. I didn't have that burning desire to be a doctor, but I was good at school and I loved science. And so I was a biomedical science major in college. And then I was working at Yellowstone National Park during the summers. So I would do, I did hiking and backpacking and kind of hippie stuff during the summers. And then I was doing biomedical science during the school year. And towards the end of college, I decided that I actually was, maybe interested in medicine because I had an encounter at one of the clinics in the national park. So someone had gotten injured, one of my friends, and we went to the Yellowstone clinic, and this doctor who lived there in the park, took care of him and fixed him up and sent him on his way. And all of a sudden I realized that I kind of like the idea of just being a handy person to have around and understanding physiology and anatomy and, being able to help people like that. And then also having the flexibility to potentially live and work anywhere in the world. Mm-hmm. So that was actually when I started becoming interested in the medical part of it. Was pretty late in college. And luckily I had good grades, so I was able to kind of just transition over and do medical school. But yeah, I was kind of a late bloomer that way.
Well, the power of IQ is always some things to consider. So even if it was late, you were like a scientist born, I would say that helps a lot here. I think that I'm pretty sure that we are born scientists or not. We don't become scientists. It's something that is inside of you and is like an artist, like being an artist, you're born an artist. Well, put it in perspective. When you are a scientist, normally you should balance your brain by artistic side as well. So, and vice versa. So you went into medicine into the school, of course, easier when you have good grades to get accepted and to be able to study medicine and medical. We're interested by any type of specialization or everyone goes in neuroscience now. Before used to go in some different practices. But did you choose any field, or you wanted to be a generalist?
I chose emergency medicine. So my residency and internship was actually in emergency medicine. So I did that for 3 years. I like the idea of being the first person to see patients in the hospital and quick diagnosis and, all of the high adrenaline stuff that comes with that job and saving lives occasionally. Yeah. So I did that for for residency. And then I worked for another 7 years as an ER doctor in Austin. So that was my initial type of medicine I went into. And then I left in 2013, and I just did a whole, like a 180, like just flipped completely from acute care medicine to more preventative medicine.
So I go back to the first point. You were a thrill seeker. You lived in Utah at that time? Still, you were in Utah?
No, I was in Tucson, Arizona for my residency, and then I lived in Austin when I was in ER.
So as a thrill seeker, were you doing any skydiving, motocross, dirt bike, and things like that?
I have done skydiving, and I like to mountain bike, and I like to hike, and I did some of those. I like outdoor sports a lot. Yeah. I wasn't the biggest like crazy adrenaline rush person like some people are, but I do like to try to push myself a little bit.
And I want to jump back to a point you said at the beginning. You said like you wanted to be at between the first to see, to diagnose, to err. That is deep. There is a big psychological meaning behind that.
Yeah, I just liked the idea of having someone come to me that didn't have any, like in my head, they didn't have any baggage. There wasn't a diagnosis coming in. Like I didn't know anything about them, and I like the idea of just being able to use their symptoms and my knowledge to help them and get a diagnosis and then kind of get them on their way, versus seeing someone later in their medical course when they already have 10 different diagnoses and all of these different things, and not really being able to kind of see them for what they really are when they first come in.
The first impression is the one that counts. So of course, if you make the first impression, you build that trust and recognition. When people are coming back with 10 diagnostics, and even now with artificial intelligence, they're going to go and find out feedback from artificial intelligence. It's going to be hard for doctors to say something, so to even diagnostic with a pinpoint decision on that. I don't know how we're going to deal through that.
Yeah, it will be interesting to use. I think with the advent of AI and all these technologies, obviously there's all these symptoms, and you can put them into the computer and say, what is it? But there's also something about what we call the gestalt. Like when you look at someone and you're like, I can look at you across the room, and because I've seen all these cases, I can say that person is sick in a way that maybe you can't, that your computer can't see. So there are some things about just the way that someone looks, patterns that we can recognize if we've seen them over and over again, that we could maybe teach AI, but I don't know how long that will take.
Then I'm going to ask you a question. Do you think that this first perception you have when you look at the room and you see someone or somebody that looks really sick or behave in a way that probably illness, you think that it comes from your gut feeling, or it comes from some sort of energy and quantum energies?
I mean, it could be all of the above. I think it's a lot of things. There's I don't think we understand it completely, I guess, is the short version. No. Because I think any doctor who's been doing it for long enough will tell you that you get a feeling about people when you first meet them. Not everyone, but certainly a lot of people, as far as whether they're very sick or not, and also what type of sick they are, and what their social dynamic is. And you get a lot of it just from the first 5 minutes of being in the room. But I don't know what the reason. I'm not sure where it's coming from.
We know, and we're getting there with the recent Nobel Prize on quantum physics. We know that there is this effect and action reaction. But on the point you just said before, like within a few minutes of talking to people, you know that there is something wrong behind it. Our system now is kind of sick itself, because doctors don't have few minutes anymore. Many of these guys coming to see a doctor for something, they just don't get diagnosed.
Yeah, that's a big problem in the emergency department. It's a big problem in primary care in general. Yeah. I mean, you're in primary care, the insurance company is paying you for a 5-minute visit or something like that. Like they're really not getting paid. And obviously patients are complex. And so to do a really good history and even just to have a conversation, that takes more than 5 minutes. So that was one of my frustrations, is I was spending so much time doing paperwork and calling consults and calling the lab and, trying to follow up on tests that weren't being done. I was spending way more time doing that than I was sitting with the patient and talking to them. But that's what we had to do to get the system to work.
How you got being before the diagnostic, like preventative medicine and things like that?
Yeah. So I decided towards the end of my ER, I was in the ER for those years. And I also started to see just kind of my own health wasn't great. I was always stressed out. I was waking up at 3 a.m. to go to work. I had 3 kids at home. They were all under the age of 2, and I was their primary caretaker. I just not eating well, not exercising, like all the things that we know we're supposed to do. I wasn't doing any of them. And I did my best, but my schedule just didn't allow it. And so at one point I just kind of had to just take a really deep look at myself and say, do I want to keep doing this for 5 and 10 and 15 and 20 years from now? If I don't think that this is going to change, what do I do? Do I have to do something to change it? And so that was my decision. It was basically like, I'm not all that well in this environment. So how can I make myself better? And I think, how can I make future patients of mine better? And the answer to me was learn more about prevention, lifestyle, nutrition, hormone replacement, supplements, like all the things that I'm interested in now.
Doing medicine before and not after, I want to know what triggered that wake-up call.
So there was a moment, one morning I was working in the ER and I was the only doctor on a very busy emergency department. It was about 4 a.m. and we had two EMS trucks come in with 2 different patients. And one patient was tachycardic. So heart rate was very fast. It was like 200 and, low blood pressure, unresponsive, kind of about to die. And then they brought a second patient in right after that person that was bradycardic. So very low heart rate in the 20s, also low blood pressure, also unconscious, also about to die. And they both came in and the EMS put the patients in side-by-side rooms because I was the only doctor on. So side-by-side rooms. So I could stand in the hallway and I could kind of direct the nurses from both rooms. Like, push these meds, try these meds, do this thing. And I stood there and I did that. And after a few minutes, I saved both patients and they both woke up and they were healthy and it was great. The problem was that I didn't feel like the happiness or the pride that I would normally feel from saving those people. Like normally those moments are what would get me through all the other shifts, right? Like it's pretty amazing. But I just had this like moment of feeling like it wasn't that big of a deal. And now I still had to go see 15 more patients with toothaches and belly pains and back pain and, and all these other things. And those patients wouldn't care that I just did this great thing. And so I just realized that if those like amazing moments were no longer amazing for me, then I probably shouldn't be working in that environment.
Because those moments triggers like the medical field in general, like what we call the syndrome of God, like saving people and getting these high amounts of neurotransmitters there. Well, being a doctor in ER is already more than honorable, but shifting career at that point because you didn't feel the fulfillment or you didn't feel any purpose in your life, not seeing yourself doing that, and still you had kids to take care of.
It was, it's kind of like walking off a cliff without a parachute. Like I didn't really have a plan. I did spend, the last 2 years that I was in the ER, I did spend my extra time, my nights and weekends and any time off I had. I started learning about other, I started going through other kind of fellowship programs and courses and online programs and conferences and learning about this whole kind of like anti-aging longevity space, like whatever you call it. But I started learning about that in my spare time. So I didn't just have no plan at all, but part of my identity was wrapped up in being an ER doctor. So it was definitely something that I had no idea how it was going to turn out. But I also just felt like if I didn't do anything at all, if I just stayed where I was, then I probably wasn't going to thrive long term. My family wasn't going to thrive and my patients weren't going to thrive.
Trust the process and no plan B, of course. That's very cool actually, because you were studying at that time, like everything that was coming up in terms of longevity and life optimization in general, I would say. And you actually studied in one of the most generator of controversy field of science, the stem cell, which is still actually, but correct me if I'm wrong, but when you started to study that, was not allowed to do it in certain countries. It was restricted in others. Some ethical problem were like there, some religious as well. In general, we're moving forward in the right direction, I guess, but changing a career in an hectic time like that and choosing one of the most controversial fields. Okay, tell me.
Well, to be fair, I didn't get into stem cells until about a year later. I kind of shifted over, started working with hormone optimization. So, menopause, perimenopause, testosterone, all of those things, and started seeing, how great they were and how beneficial they could be. Even though traditional doctors at the time, had stopped doing hormones because of the WHI, the Women's Health Initiative. So I was doing that and I was excited about that. But then I moved to Utah and I met Dr. Harry Adelson, who is my partner now at the Stem Cell Clinic. And I called him up in early 2014 and I said, hey, I hear you're doing amazing things with stem cells. He was one of the very first people to be doing this in the US. And he had to travel to South America, Central America to learn these things because like hardly anyone was doing it. But he was very, very kind and is still one of my great friends. And he invited me to his clinic and he said, why don't you just come hang out with me for the day and you can see what I do. And so I did. And I was just completely blown away by what he was doing. And so I just kept showing up over and over again. Every so often I'd show up, and finally, after a few months, he was like, "Amy, I think you're not gonna go away. So why don't you just come work with me?"
That's cool. Yeah.
And so I did. So but that's kind of how I got into it. I was fascinated by it. I knew it was happening. At the time, it's still a controversy. There's still controversies in stem cell medicine for sure.
Yeah.
But these procedures are more available than they used to be.
Yeah, it is actually less controversial in the terms of athletical recoveries and things like that, where now it's like common. It is still in the health optimization or like longevity. When you see, especially here in Miami, actually, many people mention that like they're like in the 80s and they're rich enough and they go on those procedures like every month just to get younger and keep up with their girlfriend.
There's some indications that we don't have a lot of studies yet. We have a couple that have shown that stem cells IV, for instance, might be helpful for decreasing frailty in older people and improving some of the symptoms of frailty. But I think we keep learning more and more. There's so much research out there. I use them specifically for skin health and for hair restoration and for sexual health, and then longevity as well as kind of a blanket. And then my partner Harry does them for musculoskeletal pain. So we do these big procedures together, these full body stem cell makeovers. So he's doing all the joint injections, I'm doing skin and hair and sexual organs, and then we're doing IV stem cells, and it all happens over the course of an hour, a couple of hours, and you just kind of get this full body overhaul with stem cells.
Yeah, I was looking at a procedure from your recent post, and I did some research on that. But so you do some sort of blood cleaning before doing the injection with ozone, I guess, huh?
EBO2, it's basically blood comes out one arm and it goes through a red light, which is going to be helping with mitochondrial activation, and then it goes through a big filter like a dialysis filter, and then it also ozonates it, so you get ozone, and then it also has a UV filter, so it kills bacteria. So it's kind of like multiple different things, kind of cleaning your blood like an oil change for your blood, as we say, and then it goes back in the other arm. And so you can do almost your whole blood volume in about an hour, and we do that in patients if they want it before some of the stem cell procedures.
Yeah, so that's not mandatory for everyone. It's like the one that wants, they do it.
Yeah, most people will do it. There's some people, if you have kind of small veins or just tricky veins, sometimes it doesn't work just because we have to be able to get the blood out and put it back in. Yeah. But most of the time, 90% of the time, it works, and people like it. We don't, there's a lot of research still being done on that too. Like what are the benefits, and we don't know for sure, but we think that doing all those things to your blood is probably helpful in some way.
Yeah, I know the grind. I'm a vampire. So joke aside, before we're gonna go back to stem cell and things like that, because it's just like fascinating world of tomorrow, and not the other one is also fascinating. You're a specialist in sexual health. You're talking on both, not only women, but male and female. And you seem to have a wide panel of knowledge on that. Why?
Yeah. So it's interesting because I never would have thought I would have ended up here. I grew up in a pretty like religious small town, like there are more churches than restaurants kind of thing, like, small town Texas. And this wasn't something that we talked about really at home. Like it wasn't on my radar. But what happened is after I left the ER and I was seeing hormone patients, I was working with them on hormones and lifestyle and these kinds of things. And they would come back after that initial first few months feeling better, like having more energy, having more motivation, starting to lose some weight. And they would ask me at that point for help with either their skin or their sex life. And it was one of those two things every time. And so I started thinking about skin and sex as being kind of like these next levels of health. Like, once you have your foundational stuff like handled, once you're eating well and you're feeling pretty good, working out, you're doing all the right foundational stuff, then people start to think, oh, what else could we optimize? What else could we improve? And so that's how I became interested in sexual health. And then I started learning about it. And I just found there's so many interesting things in terms of the way that sexual health parallels general health and longevity and the overlap between all of that. And I just became fascinated by it. And so I started talking about it a lot and speaking about it. And here we are.
But it's actually interesting because if we think about it, general health, if you're in good health, it shows on your skin and it shows on your sexual activity as well. So, but in our world, in our society, it comes second. It should be first.
Yeah. And what I like about sexual health, I think is interesting, is it kind of sits at the middle of all different types of health, right? So, physical health is important for sexual health, but so is emotional health and mental health and spiritual health and environmental health and then social health, with your partner. So you have all of these different types of health that all feed into sexual health. So when you're having a sexual problem, you can look and you can say, well, where's that coming from? Is it a relationship problem? Is it a blood flow problem? Is it a sexual trauma problem? Like, it could be all different things. But if you have a healthy sex life, then oftentimes that means everything else kind of around it is pretty healthy.
I think that the psychological part of it is probably the biggest one.
Yeah, it's really big for sure. And I think that that's the hardest one to, I'm not a therapist or a psychiatrist, so that's not my area of expertise, but that's, I think, one of the more difficult ones to treat. But, from my standpoint, we use a lot of therapies to improve the physical part in hopes that that will kind of help with the psychological part. Yeah. And then obviously refer to other people who can help with that part of it.
So let's go back to stem cell. We just have the bridge to go there because you're injecting stem cell into sexual organs as well. That's an interesting part.
Yes, into both sexes. I inject into the penis in men and into the vagina and the clitoris in women. And especially when you combine them with other therapies like shockwave therapy for men or hormones for both of them, it can be really great. We're seeing some really amazing things.
Well, stem cell. Here's one of the thoughts doesn't come from my mind. Actually, it was brought up by our friend Christian Draco, that is on the cover of our magazine this month. Actually, a Christian said a very nice, interesting sentence. He said, why do we take stem cell out of the body to put them back in, while we should be looking at some things to optimize the release of those stem cells that are already there?
And well, depending on what the issue is, I think certainly starting with improving your own stem cells, and that's a lot of it's just lifestyle. It's the same things that help all of our cells are going to help your stem cells. And that's always the first thing to do. And we actually won't, even if we don't feel like they've been working on their general health, if they're pretty unhealthy and aren't really doing all the things and trying to try, then we won't treat them with stem cell therapies because they don't have the foundation to even have a good response. But for certain, taking stem cells out and moving them somewhere else, it can be helpful. Like, for instance, with your joints, you don't have a lot of blood flow in joints. And so if you can take stem cells from like your bone marrow, your fat, or other sources like, umbilical cord cells or things like that, then you can put them in an area that doesn't get a lot of blood flow and doesn't have a lot of stem cells. So that's kind of the idea is, moving them from one area to the other, especially areas that don't have a lot of blood supply, or using stem cells from someone else that are, younger, healthier person or baby, not the baby, the placenta. Babies we don't hurt babies.
Taking from placenta, and people are saying, you're killing babies.
People still think that, and we absolutely do not use embryonic. Embryonic is going to be, or before the baby's born. We don't use those. We only use cells from essentially donated placentas and donated umbilical cords. They're not going to get used. They're going to get thrown away. Yeah. They go to a lab instead. So those are the types of cells that we use, or we use the patient's own cells.
Next gen medicine that will emerge from everywhere. We'll see more and more. Of course, there's still some sort of interesting factors like migration of stem cell and turning into degenerative or cancers or things like that. But as long as it's controlled, I think that it can be safe. But in terms of communication, that there's still a lot to do to make sure that people understand that we're not taking blood from babies.
No, yeah, they don't understand. And to your point, it's really only the embryonic stem cells or the ones that are kind of like embryonic stem cells that are made in a lab that have been shown to cause cancers and tumors and things like that. The stem cells from your own body, when you move them, they don't increase cancer risk. And we haven't seen an increased cancer risk in taking, umbilical cord stem cells or things like that. So for sure, that's been a concern of people, but we're not using the types of cells that have been shown to cause cancer.
Aesthetic medicine using PRP. It's interesting because I do remember when this technique came out, dermatologists or clinics or things like that, they were not saying that they were extracting cells. They were saying that they were just using placenta of the blood after centrifugation. So let's clarify this technology for everyone here, what it is.
They're kind of two different things. So platelet-rich plasma, or PRP, is just taking blood from the patient, centrifuging it, like you said, and taking the plasma part, which has a lot of platelets in it. So that's why it's platelet-rich plasma, and then injecting that back in, whether that's using it for skin rejuvenation or joint healing or, whatever the purpose. So that's PRP. That's been around for decades. It's very safe. A lot of people do it. And the way that works is that those platelets have growth factors inside of them that signal healing in the tissue. So this, when you put them in there, it's kind of like fertilizer for the tissue, sending out healing cells. So that's different than stem cell therapy. Stem cell therapy, you're usually going to be either getting like bone marrow or fat, and you're isolating the stem cells, which are the cells in your body that are responsible for replicating and fall into other types of cells. So those specific cells actually then get moved and you use the cells. So you can use them, you can put them in the joints, you can put them in the skin, you can put them in the hair, but they're a little bit different in terms of the way that they work in your body. So stem cells are going to be a stronger healing force than like PRP.
Yeah, because stem cells in general, if we want to make it simple, they're just like cells that can become any type of cells. They are not differentiated, and they transform themselves into where you put them.
Yeah, they can. And although in the body, what they usually do in these procedures is they send out signals to the cells that are already there. So most of the effects we're seeing are from the stem cells sending out these repair and regeneration signals, but they can do it in a different way than platelets can. Like, you're kind of a little bit more responsive to their environment, which seems to be why they work so well.
Let me take you to that point that you said before, like you can get stem cell from fat, other places. It's interesting because for a long time, we never thought that you could get stem cell anywhere else from.
Bone marrow stem cell therapies, of course, have been around for a long time to treat different kinds of cancer, but the stem cells they're using for that they're the blood cell stem cells. So it's the cells that make your blood cells, like your red blood cells, your white blood cells. That loss is different than what we call the mesenchymal stem cells, which are the ones that we're using. So they're kind of two different types of stem cells that are in the bone marrow, and we're choosing the ones that are not the blood making cells.
Procedure to do that, it's quite long because you have to bake them, make sure you pick the right one, and then put them back in.
It's actually not that long because, well, if it's the same patient, we can take their cells out, which is just, we do it under like an X-ray guidance, like under fluoroscopy. We'll just take them out of the hip, take them out, and then just centrifuge them and essentially isolate the stem cells. You can put both types of cells in as long as it's the same patient. You can put them both in. If you have stem cells coming from a different patient, then you do have to isolate those mesenchymal stem cells, because the other stem cells, the hematopoietic, the ones that make the blood cells, they actually can cause reactions if you give them to the wrong person. So you have to, in those patients, you got to match the blood. So that's why we don't have to isolate them if it's just you giving yourself cells. But if it's you giving your friend cells, then the lab would have to isolate them.
Do you think that one day we're going to be at a point where we can cultivate and reinject like standard? I know that it's been ongoing and there's a lot of trials and research on that, but do you think that we will get there?
Yeah, I think in the coming years, we'll actually see more and more like off the shelf stem cell products that come, a lot of labs are already doing the research and trying to get their stem cell therapies approved by the FDA to be drugs. And we'll have essentially a vial of stem cells that will be probably very specific for these types of cells are good for, joint pain. These types of cells are good for hair restoration. Like, they'll be very specific. Right now, we just have stem cells. Yeah. But we don't have them that say, which direction that they're going to do best. And they still work, but we'll see more specific types of stem cells in the future.
So you're going to stay in that field for sure. Now let's jump into the overall longevity and everything. So to make a short story for our audience, you reached out to me on a message and you said kind of an agreement on that. It's a mess out there on social media. Everybody's preaching, I would say, not saying, but preaching whatever they can do. And they make people getting wrong information in general. So you seem to be on a mission on that. And when you asked me, would you join? And I was just like, of course, that's the most noble mission on this planet, making people educated with proper information.
We have been building, it's been a few years, maybe 2 years at this point. We have a Web3 platform that's called Reputable that we've been building that, the whole goal is to be able to use the blockchain and decentralized science to share data, in a de-identified way between people, so that we can start using that data then to be able to make informed decisions about what therapies, especially these wellness therapies, especially things that are not drugs, do they work or not? Like, is one better than this? And so this has been a labor of love for a couple of years. And we just started, what you joined was the Quantified Collective, which is basically a group. We're just in the kind of founder phase where we've reached out to some of the people, the key people we think in the longevity, wellness space, as well as people in tech and AI, to come together to start this kind of conversation and then build some momentum to fund Reputable, which is going to be basically, essentially like if we were able to share our data, whether that's wearables data from Oura Rings or Whoops or things like that, or labs or whatever, then you'd be able to get tokens and get paid for your data, but it's de-identified and then it's shared and aggregated. And then we can use, big data and analytics and AI to look at all the data together and see kind of what's working. And the great thing about the blockchain is that you still own that data. So, if it gets used multiple times by different people or companies, you're always still going to get a piece of, reward for that. So it's kind of a fun way to look at, like, how do we take medicine out of these silos where no one talks to each other and, everyone hoards their data. How do we make it, something that everyone can contribute to if they want and benefit from, but also we're serving a higher purpose and we're figuring out what's actually working and what's really not.
The control on that is fantastic because I think it's about time to have right information. I see many podcasts or people talking about thing one day, and you look back at even renowned scientists making a speech about like cold plunges, for example. Totally different story. You shouldn't do this. You should do it that way. It's not promoting muscle growth, and it's a mess. It is a mess, and I think that if we come up with this concept of having the right information accurately shared, available for everyone, that's a dream, the best world of tomorrow.
And I think that there are so many people who are already doing a lot of, they're doing all these different wellness practices, whether it's cold plunges or whether it's taking certain medications off label or supplements or, long walks, whatever it is, they're doing these different things. But part of the problem is we don't know which of those things is actually helping them, right? Because they're doing 10 things. Yeah. And so how do you know which one is making them, healthier or whatever? And so you really do need a bunch of people and a bunch of data and a bunch of, a lot of insight into how they're doing and feeling and all of that aggregated to see, okay, well, this is actually the cold plunge that's helping, not the long walks or whatever. So it's taking all of that information together. And I think that's one of the hard things is now we don't know.
Like, for example, when I see you have a Oura Ring, how many of these practices you do? I know you do cold plunges. I've seen you doing it. And so you probably do meditation, you do all these things that improvement for our life. But how many of these? What's your routine?
Yeah, I do. I do like cold plunges. I like walking, hiking, especially like now that it's warm outside. I love hiking. I do weight training most days. I do yoga when I can. Sometimes it's kind of hit or miss. I do kind of a meditation. It's shortish, like 5 minutes or something. But and then I just try to eat, reasonably, and then sleep. I really prioritize sleep. I go to bed pretty early every night. My kids are like, "Why are you going to bed at 9:30?" I was like, "I'm old." And I go to bed before they do. And then I have a supplement routine as well that I do.
You do, yeah.
And then I take a couple of the longevity drugs, the potential longevity drugs like rapamycin and carbos and some of those things. Yeah, I take, I have the Hot Box, which is my supplement company with the box. It has all the different stuff. So it has 19 ingredients, and I formulated it specifically because I wanted to have all of the different longevity ingredients in one easy to take formulation that you just take a packet and you just take a packet twice a day. So we have Inaven and, spermidine and apigenin and all the kind of things that are out there that are showing promise in that formulation.
It's quite interesting. The NAD, for example, is like, now it's a big hype everywhere. We know this molecule for years and years, but it's getting there and everybody's talking about it. So some people say that supplement doesn't work that much. You have to go on spray, you have to go on patches, you have to go on IV therapy or even injection. What do you think on that?
Yeah, I think the oral, when they've demonstrated that oral NR or Inamin, they do work in terms of getting your blood levels up. You have to, you have to take it every day or most days. And it has to kind of build up. It's not going to be as fast as taking like IV, IV NAD. NAD is not something you can take orally because it does get broken down in your stomach and it's not available. So you got to take precursors to it. I've been using the patches. I've been trying the ionophoresis patches for NAD kind of just once a week as a bolus, a boost. And I think those are actually helping my sleep, which is, we know that there's some circadian rhythm involvement with NAD and the genes of that. So, but I think that we don't know for sure. There's lots to learn still, but the data that is coming out, I think is exciting regarding NAD and the precursors for it.
Big fan of NAD. I've tested NAD mixed with some sort of black maca and ashwagandha, and sometimes giving a different boost. Before workout, he does very well. But anyway, short story on that. What we are here to discuss today. So in the future, you're going to be still involved in the stem cell therapy. You're going to be involved in Reputable and this collective that we're building up all together. And how do you see, like we spoke just a bit about it before, but how do you see the involvement of artificial intelligence in the management of those data that we have to collect, to clean up, to make sure that they're available, and what is behind it?
I think it's going to be really important in figuring out how to ask the right questions of the AI. You know, obviously and I'm not an AI, like I'm not an AI whiz person, but I understand enough that I do think it's going to be helpful, but we're going to have to ask the kinds of questions that are really going to help it be able to look in there and see kind of what the trends are and what's happening with the data. And even without AI, even with just kind of, you know, big data analytics, there's a lot that can be sussed out and figured out. But I do think that the AI piece it already is important. It's just going to keep being more important.
Yeah, the processing is way faster than just analyzing big data and using them for sure. But you know, look at ChatGPT-4. There's limits. If you don't have it's exactly what you said. If you don't ask the right question, you're getting some sort of biased answer, limited to as well. So the brain has this power. The human brain has this power to make sure things can be consistent and accurate. And this is where we play our role. So it's beautiful that it's a tool.
It is a tool. And it's funny. I was doing a presentation recently for a group, and I decided I was going to see if the AI could help me with the presentation. So, you know, PowerPoint kind of presentation. And so I typed in, you know, design a biography page for me. Like I gave it my name and I said, you know, put it together a biography page. And so it pulled a picture of me from my website. It had my name, it had my font from my website, but then it had the completely wrong actual biography. Like it was like, she's a child psychiatrist and she lives in, and so it was completely wrong. And it looked really legitimate. Like it was definitely me, and I'm in a pose and I look very regal, but it was a totally wrong biography. And if I hadn't checked or didn't know.
Exactly. If you were a podcaster and taking a bio, because it's so interesting what you said. You know what? I did that with my AI assistant. I asked, because I've seen all your bios on different websites, and I went to my assistant and I asked the same question. I'd like to have a complete bio from childhood to now about Amy. And here's what lovely assistant said. I think it's probably accurate. So you're a board certified physician with a focus on anti-aging, which is true. Anti-aging and regenerative medicine. So you received a medical degree from University of Utah School of Medicine.
That was UT Southwestern in Dallas. That was not right. Maybe that's why that's the problem. AI just wants to like just make things it wants to be right and to help you and to figure it out. I mean, it wants to, but it's not. It doesn't always actually have that information.
You got your degree from University of Utah School of Medicine and completed your residency training in emergency medicine at the University of Arizona.
That's right, but the medical school was not. That wasn't in Utah. That was in Dallas.
So of course you're a speaker, author, specialist, been featured in many magazines, including Forbes and Shape. Yeah, all the rest seems to be accurate. And from my assistant, Dr. Killen, is also a founder of the CellMend biotech company.
The what company?
CellMend, MEND.
I do not know that company. That's so funny.
Yeah, those are the limits of AI. So if you don't know, you can go through those things and just keep spreading fake news.
Yep. Nope. That's exactly right. And eventually it'll be able to write the fake news for you. Like, you know, it'll be able to invent the source, write the source, publish the source. And then you're going to have this like whole loop of like, well, we don't know what to believe.
That's true. And I'm going to tell you, this is not me. It's my avatar speaking to you. It's actually, I was trying to do that, to be honest, because you can reproduce the voice pretty accurately. You can reproduce the face the same way. And now I could actually have you virtually, not you present, and asking the same question. It's not even going to be you, but you're going to answer my question. What's next in your life after all these big projects?
I have at least one more project that I'm working. So that I am still working with the Hop Box is my longevity company. And so we just started we're just early launching that. So that's going to be a big project, to get that more widespread. And then I'm also starting to talk about, another project of trying to get out some of these longevity resources, more widespread to people in the United States, and, in terms of clinics and resources and getting together, like how do you find people that are doing different things and making that more available to people? So it's kind of early stages, but I would like to make a lot of this stuff a little bit more accessible. I think it's still hard to find doctors who, really understand, stem cells and hormones and peptides and and all these different sort of nuanced therapies that are out there. So my goal is to make those more widespread so people don't have to search so hard to find someone.
So it's still the same purpose since you shifted your career, like you're right on the track and you keep going in that track. That's interesting.
Just try to make people healthier, and myself included. Like, I think that the more we learn, the more we can implement. And then I think that with education comes empowerment. And my goal, I really love teaching. I love kind of using humor and playfulness and using those tools to make education a little bit more fun. And I think that, if people understand what's happening in their bodies, then I think they're obviously going to be more likely to change behaviors and move in the right direction. So I feel like lack of education is still a big problem for, just the health and wellness and medical space in general. But how can we make that more fun? How can we make it more accessible? So that's also part of my mission.
Yeah, I think that education in general is totally wrong now. It's not education. Our system is not giving any education. It's like giving tools to people to understand some concept, but they're not educating our society. You see people now getting more and more educated because they spend some time listening to podcasts, reading more, browsing documentaries on internet and things like that. Still watching like crappy Netflix. That's another part. But other than that, I think that education in general, making, like you said, fun and entertaining people with fun ideas make the retention higher in terms of concept. But now, here's the question. Don't you think that we should start educating our kids first? Because my generation, the generation after, and up to the millennium, now the millennium are quite informed, but we had to learn everything. Like even with all the school I've went through no one ever told me like you should eat that way, you should do this, you should behave that way, do some meditation. I knew that some schools are doing it, but if we start teaching our kids from the young age, like 5 or 6, hey, you know what, meditation, you can practice that. A walk after your lunch.
It's a little harder with kids because you have to get into the school system and the teachers and all the things that haven't changed in years. But I absolutely agree. I feel like that the kids are obviously all of this stuff starts when you're little, and if you can just prevent the bad habits before they actually get going, then you're going to have a lot easier time than trying to change the habits that have been there for 40 years. They are healthy, but they definitely have some habits, some bad habits. But they do extra. They're very active. They rock climb and play volleyball, and they're very active. So I feel like in general they're healthy, but they enjoy junk food as much as any other kid.
Well, I think that their kids, that better than anyone. The number of calories that those kids are capable of burning per day has nothing to compare it with our burning rate. Like it's 3-4 times more just for a kid that is 11 or 12. I would dream being able to burn that much calories.
I teach them what I know, and I just hope that they, I can at some point. So my daughters are 15, my son is 13, so they're old enough at this point where they can kind of make their own choices, and all I can do is give them information. But they're great. They have learned a lot, and I think that they will eventually, when they're adults, they'll take what we've learned and implement it.
Yeah, the roots are never lost on that. Yeah. And if the daughter is 15, forget it. You have nothing to say anymore. I have one, she's 18. She just turned 18, but tough time from the age of 13 to 18, I would say. But it's interesting. And as you said, I think that what we teach them stays in their behaviors still. And junk food is okay. My whole life, I've been lucky enough not to be attracted by junk food or sugar, but I do understand the fact that some can be, and it's okay like that.
I think it's all about moderation and, being able to be metabolically flexible and being able to be at a place where, I'm not perfect. I like to have a little wine here and there. I like dessert sometimes. And it's okay because I'm balanced out with doing other things that are correct. I think that saying that you can't have any junk food or any wine or any this, or, I think that that's actually probably more damaging.
I agree.
Than saying, you know what, have it sometimes, and then, be smart about when you do it.
Yeah, I agree on that. Actually, many people, and this is another problem we see in the biohacking community. Like some people became very extreme. No wine, no sugar at all, no. But I think, and you can probably confirm that must have an impact on their psychology and probably their sexual life.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know, but I totally agree with you. And I think that, first of all, it just must be hard. I know some people, some biohackers and friends and things that are, everything that they talk about is, how dangerous this is for you and how dangerous that is for you and how dangerous this, like, it's all about like the world around you is trying to kill you. And I just feel like that mentality, it's got to be harmful for you to just be thinking that, oh, I can't touch this receipt because it's going to bleed chemicals into my skin. Like we have to live in the world we live in, and we just have to do our best. But there is a point where I think it's gone a little too far.
Amen to that. It's exactly the same as don't be in contact with the COVID because it's going to kill you. You have to be exposed to certain things in your life. But you know what? This is the thing. I think that today everyone is looking for some hype on social media. So I've seen biohackers with big names. Every single post they do, it's alarming people about something. This is sick. This is totally sick. Like, come on, you're going to make people freak out the whole day.
Yeah, I mean, imagine just being that stressed out all day about we know stress it contributes to almost all diseases. Just the stress part of it. And so, I feel like you have to think about that in terms like, is it making me stressful? How stressful is it for me not to eat this cupcake right now? And is that going to be a problem? And so you really just have to, a lot of it's just like, for me, it's just relax and just do your best, get outside, go for a walk, get exercise, spend time with your friends and family. Like there's some of the basics is I think really what it all comes back to.
I love it. Yeah, I agree on that. Like go with the flow and chill out a bit because otherwise you're going to be like stressed all day and it's not good. We have so much negativity in our society that it should be our job. Like we're preaching about life optimization, but on the other side, some of these people are just like scaring the hell out of everyone instead of putting great vibes and positive vibes out there saying, hey, you know what? Okay, that's fine.
And I think also that there's all these great biohacker tools. And, I have many of them in my house and I do the red light therapy and I do this and that. But, I think also it's important to note that you don't need really any of those things to be completely healthy and happy and, well adjusted and all of it. Like you really do just need the foundations, and everything else is like, it's great if it makes you happy and maybe it helps a little bit, but it's not going, you don't have the foundations and the rest of it's not going to help you that much.
How would you conclude better than this? This is like awesome. Thank you, Amy. I'm thrilled. It's fun. It's fun. I like your open mindset and you're always on point on everything you say.
Well, thank you so much for having me. It's been great. And I've loved having the chance to talk to you. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. You're going to be on the cover of the magazine for sure.